Let's just kind of start from kind of the beginning, even before the landfall of Hurricane Harvey, and kind of talk about maybe about maybe about a week, 10 days ago, when you first started hearing about this storm. What kind of things were you seeing? What kind of things were you hearing? What was kind of going through your mind maybe about a week, 10 days ago?
So I think that's a great place to start because I grew up here, my family lives here, and we get hurricanes all the time. So for my brother and I, it was just there's a storm in the Gulf, it's down south of the Yucatan, no big deal, it'll hit who knows where. And then my brother calls me and says, that tropical depression's heading our way and it's going to escalate. I said, really? So I checked the map and it's heading straight for Texas with a path charted due north. And I think that's when it started to become real that, okay, we need to prepare, but still thinking it's routine, make sure we have enough water, make sure we have batteries, gas up the cars. And everyone I live around and work with is doing the same thing. Same stuff we go through every storm, every summer. Um, and then the storm just kept escalating, went from a depression to a tropical storm to a category 1 hurricane, all the way up to, I believe, a 4 when it made landfall. And that's what really got my brother and I surprised us is this storm just escalated really fast, got really powerful, really big. So when it made landfall near Corpus Christi, it was a serious hurricane, not just another storm. Um, and for my brother and I, our mother lives about halfway between the two of us, so it's what we do about mom. Coworkers are checking on each other, everybody's checking on their families, um, and then things just escalated from there faster than I think any of us expected them to. And that was probably Thursday, Friday last week.
So a lot of the things that was talked about early, right after landfall, was evacuation and all that kind of stuff. From what I've been reading and what I've been seeing, the storm strengthened so much that that was probably not an option because everybody on the coast there is kind of watching this and they were talking about Hurricane Rita and the tragic stories of people trying to get out of Houston there. But in your head and in your discussions with your friends and family, there was, how much was evacuation in your mind, or how much was of a priority, that Wednesday, Thursday area.
Right. So I think if you're talking about Houston, evacuation was not a thought on our minds or anybody's minds. And there's a couple important reasons for that. The death toll is currently 28 people. 100 people died in the Hurricane Rita evacuation, and that evacuation missed Houston. Or sorry, that hurricane missed Houston. So I had just moved back to the area then. We remember that. And the emergency planning authorities factor that in, and there were no orders to evacuate. The county judge and mayor have caught a lot of flack for that nationally, but I think they were right. Um, we still have lost a third of the lives that we lost during an evacuation for a storm that missed us. And I think people who don't live down here don't quite appreciate we're a city of 2.2 million, a county of 4.4 million, and that doesn't even count all the surrounding cities. You have a 8 county area of 6, 7 million people. Limited, well, we have a great freeway system, but you put 7 million people out on the roads and then county roads, back roads, some of which are flooded, some are impassable. You could have literally a disaster just in the evacuation. Um, many smaller towns in the path of the storm did evacuate closer to Corpus Christi and Rockport. But I think for 2 reasons evacuation wasn't considered. One, feasibility is a big problem, and two, our experience with evacuation is pretty terrible. You alluded to some stories. I mean, there were a busload of senior citizens died when it caught fire, trying to get away, and people remember that.
So landfall happens late Friday night, early Saturday morning, and as I'm watching the news, kind of on Saturday, they said, okay, there was landfall, there's some wind damage, but the real story now is going to be the amount of rainfall and the history. And I wasn't really that familiar with the history of Houston and flooding. So I mean, you're very familiar with that. Tell my audience a little bit about your history of flooding in the Houston area, and then what are your thoughts going in all day Saturday? Are you starting to see some things rise on that you see starting to see some water on Saturday and Saturday morning, afternoon, night? What are you seeing on that Saturday?
Yeah, so that's actually a great point about the rain. One thing that's very different about this storm is it had high winds, but it dumped a huge amount of rain. And this gets into a bit of science, but we talk about the dirty side of the storm down here. And what that means is these storms rotate counterclockwise. And if you're on the east side of the storm and it's right off the Gulf of Mexico, it's picking up all the water from the Gulf and then dumping it once it hits land. So Corpus Christi and Rockport, southwest of us, got the high winds, they got the tidal surge, the waves, stuff that's very damaging and dangerous. And then the storm headed towards San Antonio, then started going back south to the coast, which hardly ever happens. They usually spin off into central Texas, end up in the Midwest or Arkansas or Tennessee, and things slowly peter out. This one went back south and then started running up the coast straight for Houston. So it just kept pushing more and more rain our way, dumping more and more rain our way. Um, and that really became the huge issue. Um, you see the stats on TV, probably everyone's seen them, but we've gotten more rain in one storm than we average in a year. And it's the biggest storm I or anyone else can remember in terms of rainfall. And people I know who were here during Tropical Storm Allison, that flooded Houston, created dramatic images on TV, killed a fair number of people. This was bigger and dumped more rain. And that's mind boggling because I remember the images of freeways underwater with semis floating. And this is a worse storm. So if you flash forward to flood control, to make it simple, if you dial the clock back to before Houston was settled, this was a swamp. And the swamp filled up with water, the bayous drained it out to Galveston Bay. As people settled and we developed the area, the bayous were preserved, but turned into flood control channels. Houston keeps growing and growing and really takes off after World War II. And now we're at the size that I mentioned, and we sprawl over almost the entire county. So Houston has a reputation well earned for being a very wide, broad city. So you take all these bayous that were turned into flood channels in the 50s. You have reservoirs west of town that were built in the 40s. And then you dump a year of rain in 3 days on that system, and it just overloaded it. And the story of my neighborhood, we live a quarter mile off what's called Brays Bayou, which runs basically west to east through our neighborhood and out to Galveston Bay. It's set up as a flood control channel. 99% of the time, it's 2 feet deep. It has a really nice green belt along it. You walk, you jog. It's an attractive place to go exercise, and why a lot of people come to the area. Then you dump all this rain, and we're draining not just our neighborhood, we're draining 168,000 people who live in the watershed of this bayou. That was really our problem. It's not what's dumped on our neighborhood, it's that we're getting everything dumped in that whole watershed that's got to go through our neighborhood to get to the Gulf. And you multiply that by all the bayous in Houston. There's 5 or 6 major bayous. Every single one works the same way as flood control, but you dump enough rain on it, you fill up the reservoirs, fill up the retention basins, and the water's got to go somewhere.
Now, one of the cool
Where,
things about technology is that of course, Facebook. And I saw you sharing on your Facebook feed over that weekend. Um, it was probably an app for, I don't know if it was the Bayou or if it was what was that you were measuring that just that kept going up as far as the
yeah.
water and all that.
So one thing the flood control authority's done really well is all the monitoring stations are linked to their website, and anyone can pull up the website, pull up any monitoring station they want. So the station I kept posting is the one about 2.5 miles from my house on this bayou. So we're watching it like hawks, watching the water level go up, seeing if it's going to top the banks. And once it topped the banks, then it goes over the banks and the waters are flowing down into the neighborhoods, which are slightly lower than the banks. Um, my house is actually higher than the top of the bank, but the water, once it overflows the banks, comes down the streets and gets trapped. And then its only way out is the storm drains. Well, the storm drains go back into the bayou. So storm drains don't empty when the bayou's full. And that's when the neighborhood floods. I mean, literally, my backyard drains to the street drains to the bayou. When the bayou's full, it's like a full bathtub, and everything just goes backwards. So my house ended up flooding from all sides and through water coming up through the foundation.
Yeah, I was on call last weekend, and I was up at 4 or 5, 6 o'clock Eastern time, before dawn on Sunday, and I saw you were posting things, and I saw that you were posting the water creeping towards your front door. What were the feelings going through your head? I mean, and I know it was before dawn because it was pretty dark out there. I mean,
Yeah.
did you not sleep the night before? What was going through your mind that night before?
We didn't sleep a lot at all because there was a tornado warning between 8 and 9 p.m. after the tornadoes had struck a neighborhood 10 miles south of us. And I could see the lightning flashes and thunder of that storm. So we started off the night huddled in the interior hallway of our house, waiting for a tornado to hit, which thankfully it didn't hit us. Um, then we check the gauge, we look out the door. Okay, the street's filling. All right, it's coming up the sidewalk a little bit. In our experience, the water never quite got into our house, even in serious floods we had 2 years ago. Um, but we keep checking because this is a big storm and we're watching that big mass of rain on the radar, and the water keeps coming up and then it starts seeping in. We put towels on all the door jambs, but it just keeps seeping in, soaks the towels. And really, pretty fast, we had 3 to 4 inches in the house. Um, Thankfully, before that, my wife had already raised up furniture, got the kids to put all their stuff up, and we elevated as many things as we could, thinking we'll get a few inches in the house, worst case scenario. But in the past floods, the water had stopped literally a few inches shy of the door, and we were dry because we're a little bit higher than other parts of the street. But this water just kept going. So that's when it switched from something that seemed a potential problem, but not a significant problem, to this is a flood and we are in the middle of it and this is real. And that was the biggest thing for me, is it went from just another hurricane like I've been through before in my life to I'm now in the middle of a flood and we got to get out.
And so Sunday, I'm at the hospital. I'm making rounds and all that, and I see you posting from your car or something like that. You went to one place or another place, and I know you wanted to share your story there. And so, what was the thinking there? Is that you just wanted to share kind of what was going on from your in your neighborhood or in your point of view, or what was your thinking there?
Yeah, so it's a mix of, one is curiosity. Honestly, a lot of us wanted to get out and see what was going on, including the morning the flooding hit. I got on bathing suit and water shoes and a raincoat and went out to reconnoiter the area to see how bad was the flooding. Is this bad enough we have to get out? Is this something that we think will pass? And that's where some of that video footage. There's a point where I'm walking across a bridge that crosses the bayou, and I'm walking from what we call South Braeswood Boulevard to North Braeswood, and I'm walking towards a nursing home. It's been in the area for years, and that's where I'm in chest deep water and looking at flooded cars. And um, that's when I turned around because I could feel the currents. I was a Boy Scout. I know floodwaters kill you. I'm gonna head back to the house. I get back to the house, the water's still coming up, and we can tell it's not going down anytime soon because a bayou that's usually 2 feet deep is now flooding an area that's probably half a mile across, quarter mile across. Um, and we know from past floods, it drains down to the neighborhoods, gets stuck, and everything keeps filling up. So at that point, we got the dogs, we got the kids, we grabbed whatever we needed as necessities, and headed out the door into knee to waist high water. Had to walk down the street and then down about 6 blocks to get to my sister in law's house, who hadn't flooded yet. The water was probably a foot from her door. And that was the really scary part. Words can't describe what it's like to be leading your family and your pets who are swimming and your children who are wading through debris. We're getting pushed by currents because the water's draining back in the neighborhood. And we're literally wading through that flood water trying to get to safety. I've never been through that before. And I have never been more afraid of my life.
Now,
Because I
what's
was
your
thinking, this is real. We could drown. We could be hurt. I could lose a family member. My
wow.
daughter's 5'1". You know, I'm telling her, watch out for that current coming down that street. Turn sideways. Be careful. And they did great. But feeling that fear is totally different from reading about it.
And did you lose electricity at all? Did you lose power at all during any of that time?
No, we had power the whole time, which was ironic and didn't help a whole lot. So we got to my sister-in-law's house. Luckily, her house was, like I said, still dry, even though there was water coming up the yard. And that's when things seemed to peak. She's just farther enough from the bayou that she's in a 500-year floodplain. So we were able to get in her house, bring our dogs in, us in, clean off, dry off, get warm clothes, and hunker down, as the saying goes down here. So you can imagine, two full families and 6 dogs, because we had 2 dogs from somebody else, um, all sitting in this house waiting to see if the water's going to keep going. Because the possibility is water keeps rising, we have to evacuate her house. And at that point, we're walking in floodwater to a shelter because the cars are either flooded out or stuck in the driveway. My brother-in-law's car was at a friend's house. They had to walk home through floodwater the night before. So we're stuck. And at that point, thankfully, the water stopped rising and we could wait it out.
Now, did you know kind of the scope of what was happening, in the greater Houston area? I mean, were you connected to? I mean, I guess you were connected to Facebook and things. I mean, were you aware what was happening in other parts of the city, or not?
Yeah.
Or
Um, so definitely what to me is so striking about this, not just through social media, but in terms of the impact of the storm, since it was hitting the whole greater Houston area, an 8-county area, I'm checking the flood gauge near my mother's house, which is sitting at my old high school. I'm checking the gauges near my brother's house, texting him, calling my mother. One of my high school buddies is on Facebook Live on the other side of the bayou, showing the water coming up his driveway. So really, we use social media to keep track of each other and the internet to access the flood gauges to figure out, do we stay or do we go? Who's in trouble? Who do we need to call to check on? So in one way we're isolated, another way we're totally connected, which is really kind of a bizarre situation to be in. You know everything, yet you're still isolated and potentially in peril. But you also can check on friends, family, colleagues to get a sense of what's happening. So I think that helped keep us from feeling isolated. And I was worried about my mother. I want to make sure my brother was okay. Friends I've known for 30 plus years are all weathering the same storm, and we're all trying to make sure everybody's all right.
so did those people's power go out? Were you disconnected from them? Was there a time where you didn't know what was happening, or was
Um,
anybody very fortunate that?
Really not. I mean, at one point, the transformer behind my sister-in-law's house caught fire and burned out, but we still had cell service. So unlike other hurricanes, cell towers were all active. So we just switched to cellular access and we're able to still stay in touch. We weren't going outside to look around because it was clear to me from my earlier adventure it was pretty dangerous to do so. But yeah, we never really felt totally cut off. But I think having that access helped because if we hadn't had internet, hadn't had power, all you see is black outside your windows, and all you hear is rain, and all you see is water coming up your yard. Um,
Yeah, I mean, how does that feel to, just have minutes and minutes and hours and days of just hearing rain and just being cloudy and not seeing the sun. I mean, that's gotta like mess with your head a little bit and saying, it's is this a bad movie? Is it going to stop anytime soon? Because you've been through these, something like this before, and obviously, like, as everybody said, it's been nothing like you've had before. But just days and days and days of just the rain. I mean, that's gotta just make you go
yeah,
nuts.
it was a lot more drawn out, and that's I think one of the really hard things about hurricanes in general, and this storm in particular, was how drawn out it is. So you're wired, you're edgy, you're worried, you're nervous, you're anxious. You're trying to decide: should I stay? Should I go? Should I go pick up my mother? Is she safer in her neighborhood than mine? All these decisions are in your head, and we're all trying to work because maybe it'll miss us and it'll just keep on going and this will blow over. So that week beforehand, all that's going on. And then even through the weekend, same thing. And yeah, I'm used to hurricanes that blow through usually in 24 hours, do a lot of damage, but then they're gone, sun comes out, you clean up, and it sucks. It's terrible, but it passes. This was so drawn out. I think the tension, anxiety were a lot higher for everybody. Um, and that added a whole nother level of really disaster to this is how do you emotionally and mentally handle that prolonged time period? I've never served in combat. I have no idea what it's like to serve, but I imagine that's got to be a little bit of what soldiers waiting for a battle feel. And I'm thinking if this is a little bit of what they feel, I can't conceive of what that's really like. But this little piece of that anxiety is just very tough. Um,
And I would imagine that, your friends and your family and your kids, had a lot of questions like, hey, why is this going on for days and days and days? And they're probably looking to you. And what do you tell your family? What do you tell your kids about, this
yeah.
kind of this
Um,
epic storm that never happens?
so I'll start with the dogs. And this sounds like a silly thing, but we're dog people. We love our pets. And the dogs were so anxious, circling the house, panting constantly. You could just feel their anxiety. Um, the kids actually did pretty well. My niece is in grade school, but she's been through Hurricane Ike, where they're in the house we're in now, and they were without power for 2 weeks. And my brother-in-law says he thought the house was going to shake apart. My kids went through Ike too, and were without power. They're in high school. They're a junior and senior. Um, so they were really keeping themselves under control. But when I talked to them, they were really, really anxious too. They're just trying really hard to keep it together. And I just try to keep reassuring them that we're here, we're with family, we're together, we'll all help each other, and we will get through this. Dad's been through it before, mom's been through it before, your aunt and uncle have been through it before. Um, I guess the things you always tell your children that it'll be okay, but you're telling them at the same time, it might not be okay, and we might have to take off again.
And
I don't
you're
want to exaggerate. We're never in, I think, danger of death, but there were several moments where I had to think about the possibility and see it coming and make sure we did the right things to avoid it.
so you're at your sister's, and I guess you're just kind of waiting for. I presume you'd have to wait for the authorities to say, "Hey, it's okay to go outside," or "It's okay to go to your house." Like, what is that the process of trying to get back to your house and trying to do that? Is you have to wait for the
Yeah.
authorities to kind of clear that?
I literally, my brother-in-law and I were just glued to those flood gauge sites, checking them, refreshing them constantly, waiting for the water to top. There's a graph that I posted several times. There's a little blue line, and we're just waiting for it to go below the top of the bank. And when it finally started going down, we walked around. The streets near her were dry, except for water in the gutters. So I started heading towards my house. The first attempt, we got halfway there, and my son and I turned around because we could tell the water wasn't drivable. The second time, walked it a little more. It's like, hey, it's dry. Great. Son, let's get in the car. We need to grab a few things. Um, there's some stuff he wanted to check on. And, we wanted to get out because we've been cooped up in the house for several days. So we get halfway down the main boulevard, gets through some floodwaters, gets dry again, turn onto the street. I'm able to get down the street, get up my driveway, check on my wife's car. House is still flooded. It's a pond from one side of the street to the other. And then I look back down the driveway and the water's gotten higher. And it's over the wheels of this truck that's stuck in the middle of the street. And then I look back at the big tow truck that's stuck in our neighborhood and it's up to the flatbed of the tow truck. And I had really this moment of fear that this is what they always told us in Boy Scouts was a situation to get out of. The water's rising. And if I don't do this right, I'm going to flood my engine. The car's going to be stuck. I'll lose my car. And my son and I are going to have to wade back through floodwaters to get out. And that'll happen in just a few minutes. I got out of the house and grabbed what we needed. We're going to try to get to the Walmart to see if it's open. And the water's just shot way up and drove halfway across the yard, got into the street, got out. Thank God the car engine didn't flood. And we got back home to my sister-in-law's house. And we didn't go out for a while after that.
Yeah, I mean,
That was that moment of, I've got a second to make a decision. And if I don't do this just right, my son and I are in real trouble. And thank heavens I made the right decision and did it the right way. But that moment will be etched in my mind for not being sure. And that's where I get back to the confidence is I had this kind of false confidence that I've been through these for 47 years. And I've never had that moment of, we might not get out of this if we don't do this right. That was chilling. And my son was a trooper, but it's like, son, we have to go now. Get in the car. In that tone of voice, when your father says that, you get in the car as fast as you can, but you're shaking inside.
wow. So you get back.
Sorry, my father wasn't there to help me, I could have used
uh,
him.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So you get back and then you get back to kind of refreshing uh, the levels and things and then trying to kind of see where things stand.
Yeah. The
Um,
things really improved after that. The rain, we got more and more gaps in the rain bands. The neighborhood slowly started to drain. We were finally able to get back to the house. And after the streets were completely dry, because I didn't try that again driving through floodwaters. You can do that once, and you don't get a second chance.
so
Um,
what was it like when you first saw sunlight and no less clouds and no clouds? What was that feeling like?
I'll I'll tell it this way: I didn't even know the sun had come out until we were watching the news because the power had come back on, and the newscasters pulled up a shot of the sun and said, "Hey, look!" And they all turned around. These are like pro newscasters, very sophisticated. They're all like, "Wow, the sun's out!" And then I look out the window. Hey, what do you know? The sun's out. Um, and we all had, I imagine, this collective moment citywide of everyone from these professional newscasters down to me and my brother and sister-in-law's living room, suddenly realizing, oh, it's not raining anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
So it
Um,
was, I won't say magical, but it was a pretty powerful moment.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine. I just saw the people kind of talking to newscasters about what it was like to see the sun after days and days and days of rain and clouds. So if I follow the timeline right, so you got back into your house yesterday and started cleaning things up. Is that right, or what was that like?
Yeah, so when we first went back into the house, we could see the water was 6 inches high, um, a lot of water damage. Um, then we get back into the house, really start cleaning up. Probably 3 days ago, um, and my cousin and I decide, okay, let's start taking up the hardwood because we had hardwood floors in half of our house. It's all ruined. We know the walls have got to come out next. We're hoping some furniture can be saved. Trying to pull up this hardwood, um, and I laugh now because I all my life had wanted hardwood floors in a house that I own someday. I will never buy hardwood again because it's like taking out a jigsaw puzzle that some jerk glued together everywhere. And we're trying to pry apart this hardwood, and it takes us like 5 hours, and we complete one room, and we're about to fall over from exhaustion. And the water coming out smells like a combination of cadavers from med school and bilge pump water, and that's spraying on us, and it's damp, and the house smells like a swamp. Um, and look at each other and realize, okay, we've done one room in 5 hours. We're exhausted. We got 6 rooms to go, and we haven't even started on the walls or the furniture. And there's mud everywhere, and it smells to high heaven. That was just humbling. It's like I don't know how long it'll take me to finish cleaning out my house, even working as hard as I can. I could be at this a week, 2 weeks, and that's just to clean it out. That's not to even make it livable yet. So back to my sister-in-law's house we go because we still can't sleep in the house. It's still not really habitable. Um, and that was really, yeah. I put on Facebook how I felt last night. I hit a low. I mean, I thought I know we can get through this abstractly, but this is going to take so long, take so much effort, and all the emotions just hit me all at once. And a medical issue that I've been kind of nursing for a couple of weeks cropped up right in the middle of all this, that I had to deal with personally. And that's when it was just I got to check out for a while mentally, and take a break. Um,
So is that kind of where things stand now? Is that you're in the slow process of cleaning out your home and going, you know, trying to go room by room and trying to go as diligently and as fast as you can to do that. And obviously, it's a long process and taking breaks and getting fatigued and going back to your sister's house. And but that's kind of where things stand as far as your home at this point.
yeah. So today, the crew from a local real estate agency showed up. We had 10 folks to help us. So we got all the hardwood cleared out, took out all the furniture that was damaged, saved what we're going to save, cleaned up all the rooms, at least in terms of getting stuff off the floor and bagged up. And basically, it's sorting what do we throw away, what do we dry out and try to keep. And the street's dry, the house is drying. Um, Tomorrow, we'll meet with the contractor we've used for household work, and his crew will start tearing out the walls. Um, and we'll go from there. I mean, long term, we got to fix floors, we're going to have to replace walls, replace furniture. All the mattresses are unusable. Um, Tear out cabinets. And what strikes me is I never realized what flood depth means. So if 6 inches in my house destroys the furniture, the walls, and the floors, now I get how 3 feet destroys a house. And when I saw stories on the news about somebody with 3 or 4 feet of water in their house, like, oh, their house is gone. They're gonna have to raise it or strip it and rebuild. Um, and that's really sobering. I mean, we'll be okay long term, but it's gonna be a long term struggle for us to get
I,
back to normal.
I know that obviously you're focused on your own home. Have you been able to talk with some of your neighbors and I presume it's very similar situation with their home and mentally in that neighborhood. Um, would that be the case?
Yeah, so I'm sure this is true in every city and every neighborhood, but it really amazes a lot of us how our neighborhoods really come together and our city comes together in these kind of situations. Neighbors were checking on everybody. When I walked out on those floodwaters, three different people said, make sure you check on that mother and daughter at the end of the street. They're both in poor health. Make sure they're okay. Three different people. Make sure you knock on their door. Um, so people are knocking on neighbors' doors, walking up and down the yards if they can get back and forth. We go to my sister-in-law's house, the next door neighbor's wife's 37 and a half weeks. She is feeling pressure. So my wife and I are putting together a crash delivery kit that you would laugh at because it's all we had available, but we're mentally preparing to deliver a baby next door if we have to. Um, but people really look out for each other, and everyone helps in the way they can. I've got a dryer. I've got a gas range. I can heat water for you. Send your kids. We shuffled kids from house to house so that no one family would have all the kids at one time, but parents could get a break or have time to deal with what they had to deal with. Um, Shuffling pets around if we had to, borrowing a generator. Um, it really is amazing to see a community come together. And people literally were today just walking up and down the street. Can we help you? What do you need us to do? Um, Very good friend of mine flooded. Also, he had volunteers from all over helping him out. Um, Actually, two of the doctors I work with live within a mile of me. All three of us flooded, so we're texting each other. What do you need? Which remediation company are you going to use? Have you filed a FEMA claim yet? Um, yeah, I mean, I can go on and on, but really, it was great to see everyone try to help each other. I think that's the spirit that really takes over. People just instinctively pull together, and everybody checks in.
And we talked a little bit before we went live, about the real kind of social media impact and how people were connecting with each other or calling for help or using Twitter and Facebook and all these social media things. And they were saying that that this was kind of the social media type of hurricane, tropical storm. And was that the case from your point of view, as far as you've been through some of these before, and you're seeing this digital communication, um, being used to either call for help or to connect families or to connect friends? Is that kind of what you were seeing in kind of in your
I
Facebook
think
feed?
so, and as much as we often joke about social media, and you're probably on every platform there is, and a few I don't know about. Um, if I compare to Hurricane Ike, and Ike, we lost communication because the cell phone towers went down, the cell networks were severely compromised, and it was a huge problem not being able to communicate. Because I was medical director of a community health center, the only way I can communicate with the residents and attendings is to go walk to people's houses. Well, they're spread over the whole county, and all I could do is check on neighbors. I didn't even know if the clinic was usable. Next door to check on the hospital, I'd have to walk to the hospital through some flood water to check on it. Whereas here, having communication was huge. And to me, Twitter and Facebook were really, really useful. Um, from every time someone posts, the questions back were, how are you? Are you okay? For me, often it was, hey, how are your parents? I remember them meeting them 30 years ago. Hey, how's your mom? You know, I can't tell you how many relatives of mine from all over the country check on your mom. My mother's widowed, and I told her not to come to my house because I flooded. She actually did great, but they all want to know how's their cousin doing, how's their sister-in-law doing. Um, that was really helpful to us to get all that love and support, and helpful to me to be able to call my mom, talk to her on the phone, and then tell her whole extended family she's all right. And that just repeated over and over and over. People could post needs for assistance on Facebook. They could post I'm in trouble on Twitter. All the law enforcement agencies and rescue agencies, everyone uses Twitter accounts. The county judge, the mayor, on and on. So you can get official updates. You can get warnings. Watch out for looters. These people with these jackets are not really law enforcement. Don't let them into your house. Um, the mayor, the county judge, and all the head emergency response officials did a live press conference every day at 5, and it was live streamed on Facebook, just like we are now. And that's huge. We can all see what's going on, get official information. Um, People are posting, donate here if you want to help. Hey, go here if you need assistance. It was just amazing to see Facebook used in a way that it always could have been, but not as a marketing tool, not as a, hey, let me see what my friends are doing. Let me see if my friends are okay. Let me see if my family is all right. Um, in a way that phone calls, that texts, the emails would not have been able to accomplish.
And something that you did very well, Troy, is that I mean you were basically a local reporter, and I saw updates on what was happening to the structures of the synagogues, and I asked you about the hospitals,
Right.
and some were evacuating and some were not, and you use your Facebook feed, but more is a little bit as a reporter, and I don't know if that was something intentional or that was maybe a coping mechanism to try to get the word out, or just in your own mind to try to just say share what was happening in your community. I thought that was very well done.
Thanks. Was not intentional, but I think it was everything you mentioned. You know, a lot of us have talked about how you want to be doing something and how the waiting was really difficult, waiting for the storm to hit. Posting stuff on Facebook was a way for me and a lot of other people to feel like we were helping. Um, and therapy. I need to be doing something positive out of this because I don't know when our house will be whole. I don't know when our lives will be back to normal. But if I can do something positive, that gives me hope and that keeps me going. I think that was true for most of us. Um, and as a way to connect, you know, the County Medical Society put up a website of open pharmacies because I'm trying to call in an antibiotic script for a neighbor who's got cellulitis of his finger and lymphangitis going up his arm. And I don't know what's open. And I don't want to get stuck in floodwaters to call to find out, but I can go on to the internet, go to that website, put in a zip code, find out what pharmacies, and get a prescription called in. And that was possible through the State Medical Society, County Medical Society, Facebook, me, and the neighbor. And that just was replicated over and over. Um, Part of why I did the reporting thing is I'm a news hound, and I also want to make sure accurate information was getting out. That county hospital you talked about, I went to medical school here. I spent half my rotations at the hospital. Many hundreds of physicians in this city and county have a deep emotional connection to Ben Taub. And people all over the country who trained at Baylor have a deep emotional connection to that hospital. So I honestly took it a little personally, and I mean no offense, but I'm going to get the truth out. And if Ben Taub's evacuating, I want it known. If they're not evacuating, I want it known. And I want the reasons that they made that decision known. Because we know what happened in New Orleans. Those people came to Houston, and we weren't going to have to let that happen in our city. Um, and I want to make sure people knew all the things that we were all trying to do to help um, in any way people could. And if I can post articles that are helpful, um, that's great. If I can connect people to resources, that's great. And I think a lot of us, definitely my physician friends, were all doing the same thing. People that are wet, people that are dry. Um, I called a colleague. Hey, I need some help with such and such. He said, "Great, I'm on the way to pick up a nephew. Then we're going to get my other relative because I'm bringing them all back to my house because they all flooded. But let me call in that script that you need." While she's in the car. Um,
I don't know. I mean, this is. I mean, it sounds like a dumb question, but I mean, are you working? I mean, are your patients
no,
reaching out to you? I mean, are they saying, "Hey, I have this illness, or I'm running out of my insulin," or is that type of situation happening to you?
so it hasn't happened to me yet, but a couple things we did that worked really well. Um, we have a chronic care manager in our office who's a nurse, and before the storm, she called all our chronic care patients in the Medicare chronic care management program who are our sickest patients and asked everyone, "Are you okay? What do you need before the storm?" We try to call in scripts early and make sure people had what they needed. We had to shut down our office because even though the office was okay, one doctor was trapped in an evacuation order and couldn't get back to his house. Me and my other colleague, who live a mile apart, were both flooded out and living with relatives, and we couldn't get to the office. So we shut down we have 8 clinics across the city. We shut down all 8 clinics through Wednesday, reopened half the clinics Thursday. My clinic will stay closed because our patients are scattered over I don't know where because they evacuated a lot of Fort Bend County where we work. Our 2 of us can't get there, and now that we can't get there, we're busy repairing our houses. The third doctor still has to be careful where he goes because they have evacuation orders in place, and there's some areas of his neighborhood that aren't safe. So we made the decision to keep our office closed until Tuesday because I thought, one, we can't get there to work. Two, we don't even know where our patients are. I did log in, checked our EMR, um, did a refill that had come up, and basically, I have to give a big shout out to Dr. Clive Fields, Dr. Alex Sue, Jennifer Celia, and everyone else that kept our office running virtually. The people that were on call over the weekend took call through the first half of the week. Everyone could get to the main office, got there. People worked out of their homes. Um, Dr. Fields is the senior partner, and he volunteered to take call for all of us that couldn't. And that's a way we're able to keep the system running and get patients what they needed. Countywide, the Red Cross kicked in, all the hospitals, the hospital systems worked really hard to set up shelters, provide emergency care, get meds to people who needed it. So I haven't heard of any major issues because really anyone who could get to a shelter or a hospital got there. Everyone who could help helped. And our hospitals and hospital systems learned from Ike, learned from Rita and Katrina. We have tiers of response teams and messaging systems for all the hospitals. And I was getting texts telling me, okay, your team C, stay at home. Team B, go in with 3 days of supplies. Team A, go home now, come back in 3 days. Um, so I think we have robust enough systems we're able to avoid any crises and cope with a disaster on a medical level. Um, an example is it's gone so well, they're turning doctors away from the shelters because we have too many. But we need social workers if any social workers are free.
Yeah, that was one of my last four questions for you. So the first question is, you said social workers. What else have you heard that is needed in your kind of micro community or in the community in general that is
So
needed there?
I would say pretty much all the needs are being met in some degree. Medically, we have plenty of physicians, plenty of nurses. There's a need for social workers and psychiatrists for basically counseling of disaster trauma, mental disaster trauma. So that's a current ongoing need. Supplies, there's more medical supplies. There's plenty of medical supplies in all the shelters. Red Cross is gradually winnowing their list and getting more and more specific. They've got mountains of blankets and pillows and kids' clothes and toys. Um, Everything down to feminine hygiene products, toiletries. Really, any need is being met. Any need that's not met goes up on Twitter and Facebook, gets spread everywhere. And I've got my aunt in Albany, New York, asking, where do I send baby clothes? My sister-in-law has been really active in the local Jewish Federation's disaster relief effort, um, and actually made it home tonight. Last night she was out really late coordinating that. So we're getting the help we need. Gasoline supplies on the way. The grocery chains are, sending trucks as soon as the waters were down enough to send in trucks to replenish the grocery stores. Um, there's some scattered fuel shortages, but it's not a major issue at this point. But
Um,
also, I'm not driving anywhere and keep my tank full. So a lot of the county judge and the mayor said, if you don't have to go anywhere, don't go anywhere. Law enforcement said the same thing. Stay off the roads unless you have to be on the roads. And I think the majority of people are heeding that advice because it's just common sense. And they've got enough to do with their own homes to stay put.
so my second of my last four questions is you mentioned you're a news hound, which I really appreciate. Is there any misinformation or any kind of fake news that you wanted to clear up that is wrong in kind of the general media?
So my favorite one is Floyd Merriweather did not give 200 million to the city. I wish that was true. But no offense to the famous boxer, someone faked that story. Um, there's a kerfuffle over a change in the penalties for insurance claims that don't adequately pay on flood insurance claims. The rules change September 1st, which is tomorrow. What a lot of people are very confused on is they think you have to file your flood insurance claim by September 1st. I've talked to my insurance agent. I've read the official releases from my state representative, who's an insurance attorney, and from another state representative I know who's an anesthesiologist and former hospital chief of staff, and they've explained in detail submit your claim. There's not a September 1st deadline for claims. The changes affect your potential settlement if you have to sue your insurance company because they didn't do what they said they would do contractually. But that's probably one of the biggest bits of information because people are worried about their homes. I mean, we still know for sure. We think we'll be able to save the house. We hope so. It'll help a lot to get that flood insurance payment. Um, Probably really no other major misinformation, but we definitely all had to watch very carefully because somebody posted a Jewish charity. I shared it. My wife shared it. And my sister in law says, wait, that thing that popped up in our feeds, it's not a real charity. So we all had to take that post down. And then make sure we're watching to see what the real posts are. And it's tricky. We're all trying to help, but in trying to help, at the same time, you can spread misinformation and not even realize you're doing it. And that flood insurance thing is a classic example. No one meant any ill will. I had friends in, Minnesota posting the articles, but I'm glad too this government officials could get out on social media and say, no, this isn't true. Here's what the story is. Um, so yeah, no, the real major issues just, there's a great Time magazine article about how the hospital systems dealt with a disaster, and I definitely recommend it. A med school classmate of mine who is an OB-GYN, who's at one of the women's hospitals at Texas Children's in St. Luke's, put that out. And it was a great summary of how all the healthcare system, hospital systems are working closely with EMS, with law enforcement, fire and rescue to take care of everybody and deal with situations like the county hospital where the kitchen was damaged. They couldn't provide hot meals. They tried to evacuate. They couldn't get patients out, but they could get staff in. So they quickly switched gears from evacuating all their critical patients to we'll bring in all the staff we need because they can be kayaked across the ditch and we'll keep the patients here because that's safer. And then they got in food, they repaired the kitchen, and now they're up and running again. Um, so that was probably the biggest issue. Is personal to me was yes, we kept patients in hospitals, but there's reasons why we did that, and we did it because transfers can be really dangerous in a disaster situation, and it in the end worked out better to bring surgeons, nurses, food, whatever was needed to a hospital because those are often the safest buildings in the area than try to move patients in a storm. And you saw some awesome stories. I mean, where I grew up, the hospital where my father was treated before he died, true story, they canoed a pediatric surgeon to the hospital to relieve a torched testicle. And they had to boat the patient to the hospital to get him his surgery. And that's pretty amazing. But I put the post up there because I thought, here's 20, 30 people at least who made this happen. And that's amazing. But that happened over and over.
So the last question is, sure, what message do you have to your friends or strangers or anybody who has reached out to you during this time? I as I said before, I can only imagine going through that in a very very tough time. Do you have a message for those people who have reached out to you either virtually or in otherwise to help out your situation?
I would say one, if you don't think you can help, you can always help. And all the likes, all the Facebook comments, the love and support have had a huge emotional impact on all of us and kept us going. So it helps my friends and family scattered across the whole country feel connected, and it really helps keep our morale up and reminds us that we're part of a big community. We're going to be okay. I'm gonna lapse into cliches, but I'm sorry. I'm a native Houstonian, a native Texan, and we're going to take care of ourselves. We'll make sure everyone in our city is all right, and we'll keep working until the job's done. And being Texans, we promise to ask for help, and we promise to accept it. So we're going to be all right.
And those of you who are watching live now, and I really appreciate all the views that we've had, or even watching afterward. Our friends at the Texas Academy of Family Physicians, you go to their Facebook page, they make some suggestions of the American Red Cross and the Salvation Army, and I've had a lot of things on my Facebook feed to donating to certain charities. Troy, do you have any other recommendations as far as organizations to donate to?
Um, no, I think if you want to help medically, the Harris County Medical Society, the Texas Medical Association, Harris County Academy of Family Physicians, and Texas Academy are great places to start. If you want to help with supplies, I would start with the Red Cross and work your way out from there. Because you don't want to get caught with a charity that maybe is not doing the help that's necessary. And there's also too many local charities to keep track of. So Red Cross is a great place to start. For my part of town, the Jewish Federation of Greater Houston is a headquarter mile from my house. 71% of Jews in Houston live within a few miles of where I am. That's why you see so many posts about synagogues. Um, they've kicked into high gear and are taking donations, coordinating volunteers. But I guarantee if you called up the Baptists, the Methodists, the Catholics, the Lutherans, every religious organization, I'm sure, is kicked into high gear. So those are good places to start. Um, and I'm sure I'm missing a ton of local organizations that are also helpful. Um, and they connect with the right people.
And my last question for you, and it may be just too soon to ask, but I'm going to ask it anyway, since you're still kind of in it. Other things that that you've learned about yourself, you've learned about your family, going through this, very unique, stressful, type situation over the past, 7 to 10 days.
Yeah, I would say I'm someone who always thought I could handle whatever would come at me, whatever a storm would bring. I've been through it, and this showed me I can get through it, but also I can get the blank scared out of me. And that's real, and I have to deal with my own little disaster stress and work through it, and I'm okay. Um, so that was humbling, and yet I think important for me to go through because now I don't have the illusions of, oh, it's just another storm. Um, and it cured me of that kind of false bravado in a way that I had in my own head. I'll say my wife is amazing. She's organized all the insurance details, is awesome in crises, um, juggling everyone's mental health, the dogs, the kids, mine, everybody's. So she's been fabulous. My sister-in-law and brother-in-law are great. Um, hosting us, him cooking us hot meals is awesome. I've learned my kids are really resilient. When we were in the interior hallway with a tornado warning, my son brought chips and water bottles. He's almost got his Eagle Scout. The Boy Scout training kicked in, and he did an amazing job. And my son has high functioning Asperger's, so you can imagine what it's like when you're on the spectrum. So that was amazing. Sorry. Um, and my
No.
daughter was just did great too. Um, as my wife said it best, you've raised your kid right when she's more worried about her homework and than her shoes. And I mean, really worried. Dad, I got to get into my room. We can't open the door because the floor's buckled. Well, Dad, I got to get in my room to make sure all my homework's okay and check all my books. I'm not worried about the clothes. They're replaceable. School starts next week. Um, and I'm the proudest father in the world of those two because I'm telling them this is the worst storm you may ever go through. And are you okay? And they're hanging in there. That's pretty impressive.
Uh, Troy Fessinger, I want to thank you for sharing your story. And I want to thank you for uh, you know just doing what you do down there. I was hesitant to kind of reach out to you because I didn't want to feel like I was kind of taking advantage of the whole situation, but I know that following your Facebook feed, following you on social media, I know that you wanted to tell your story. I wanted to tell one story from Houston. um, and you're going to be going to San Antonio to the Congress of
I
Delegates.
will be in San Antonio, Lord
FMX,
willing, and the creek don't rise, as they say.
rise again, I guess.
Yeah,
um,
but
so,
I should be there.
so
It's hard to think about it now. I promise I'll shave between now and then.
so you will be there.
And I
Uh,
have bathed.
we'll be there in about 10 days
Yeah.
with the rest of our friends from the American Academy of Family Physicians, from the
And if
Congress
I
of
can give a
Delegates.
huge shout out, sorry to interrupt, but
Yeah, go ahead.
for the AAP Foundation to make disaster relief the charity, words can express how it feels for us. That is amazing thing. We were very appreciative, and that's huge for the Academy to do. I've never been on the receiving end of a AP Foundation annual meeting charity, but I'm glad y'all are helping us out.
I think you said it before, Troy. I mean, we help each other, and that's one of the great things that we all have seen. Not just the Houston area, that part of the country. Southeast Texas, Louisiana. Wherever this storm is spreading. Um, it's fascinating and inspiring to see these stories that are. And we're just going to see more of these stories come out. Um, Troy, is there anything that we didn't talk about? Anything else that any kind of messages or anything else that you wanted to share
Um,
before we kind of close things up tonight?
I think the final thing I'll say is, I was residency faculty for 10 years in this area, so I know a lot of folks around, and it was great to see a lot of posts from former residents, um, current and former colleagues, especially residents I helped train who are at disaster shelters, who are on disaster duty at their hospitals, who are really just stepping in and doing exactly what family doctors do, which is, what do you need me to do? I'll do whatever it is and help. And I'll give a special shout out to my friend Laura Olson Armstrong, who super glued a headlock and reduced a nursemaid's elbow. Now, these are on her two kids in her own house because she couldn't get out to any healthcare facility. But that, to me, that sums it up: is you do what you got to do. You got the skills to take care of almost any situation, and everybody's just done an awesome job, down to the interns and residents who did disaster duty at the hospitals. They all did a fabulous job and should be very proud.
Well, thank you so much for sharing so much time with us this evening. I know you got to be exhausted for a number of reasons on a number of different levels. Um, but Troy, thank you so much for the time. I hope that that we will see you in San Antonio for the AFP meeting. I know there's a lot of people out there is going to be going to see you and to see a lot of people from that part of the world, just to give you a big hug and
Thanks.
to just say hello and again, AFP Foundation, afpfoundation.org. I put that on my Facebook timeline. And I know a lot of our friends in the Family Medicine Revolution are going to be donating to that. Um, Troy, thanks again for the time. I will see you in San Antonio. All our friends will see you in San Antonio. I will give you the last word tonight.
I would say thank you, everyone. Your thoughts and prayers are really appreciated, and it makes me feel really good to know we're not in this alone. That I'm in this with my neighbors, with my patients, my colleagues, and my family medicine family. Thank you, everyone.
And so that ends our program tonight, kids. I will rebroadcast this on all my social media things. Troy knows all about them. But just go to drmikesfull.com and follow me on Twitter. And I will be broadcasting from San Antonio. So we will see all of our friends very soon.